because it seems to be a very, of course my first disclaimer, there are lots of ways to do half-halts. Everyone knows that, and you've probably all been taught a different way for each and every one of you, which is fine. This is the way I do them. I think it makes sense to me, it makes sense to the horse, and seems to be effective, and so we'll get started. The basic, we know a lot of things about half-halts is that we've all been told. It's preparation, it's a good way to let the horse know that something is coming up. The main purpose is to rebalance the horse and convince them to put a little bit more weight on the hind end and elevate the front end. Of course, on a Grand Prix horse, it's going to look different than on a training level horse, but I think it's still important to execute it the same way, even though your expectations will not be the same for the training level horse. But I think it's very important to have the same methods on the horses from when they're young, so they don't reach, say, second or third level and you start something completely new. They grow up with it. So we may not all get the chance to train our horses from the beginning, but every horse can do it to some extent. And so I think a lot of people, I'll start with the things that I think the half-halt is not, because I think there's a lot of confusion about that. I think the biggest, a lot of people have questions like, well, did my half-halt actually work? How do you know if your half-halt works? The first thing to ask yourself is, did anything change, first of all? Did your horse notice that you did anything? And that sounds very elementary, but I see a lot of people half-halting. The people are doing lots of things. And the horse is not doing anything different. So that's the first question to ask yourself. Did the horse notice you? I think it's important to have a picture in your mind of what the goal of the half-halt is. And the goal is not necessarily short-sighted as to just tell your horse you're going to make a transition or tell them something's going on. It's to rebalance your horse and to take the gait, the trot, or the canter and not necessarily take away from it. We don't want to make the gait smaller. We may want to make it shorter, but we substitute for the length of the stride, we substitute height, and that's very important, because most of the time what I see happening is everything's just getting shorter, and this way too. Shorter this way and shorter this way, and slower, and this is not what we want. We may, and there's a lot of different ways to measure the gait. It may be slower in the sense that you will get from point A to point B in a slower amount of time, but the important thing is, do you want to add more steps? Okay, so you may not slow down the rhythm. The rhythm has to stay the same. That's at the very bottom of our pyramid is rhythm. So it's a good check to see, well, if I did a half-halt, did my horse's rhythm get slower? That's not good. It should not get slower. Are we going from point A to point B a little slower? That can be good, because sometimes that doesn't change either. We half-halt and the horse is still going in the same speed. And so that's one of those things that you want to make sure that something changed. But if you've only made the gait shorter, if you've taken away from it, taken away height from it, then that's not the goal. The goal is to say, if you can take a trot and make it into passage, you make the trot higher, or the canter more elevated and on the spot. And that's the goal of your half-halt. So with that in mind, we must make sure, because our seat and our legs, our seat is probably the most important tool we have to tell our horse what to do. Leg, of course, always needs go, but if you drive too much with the leg, you have the risk of driving the horse straight into your hand, and then you get too much in your hand, which we don't want either. So, but our seat, since it's directly connected with the horse's back, our seat can tell the horse what shape we want the stride. So if we want it longer, we must make our seat take a longer motion on the horse. If we want the horse more elevated in the stride, we can do that with the seat, because it's like almost you pick the horse up from the saddle, from his back. And so I think a lot of us have been taught to hold with our seat and go against the horse's forward motion, which is very effective in slowing the horse down, but that's not what we want. That's not only what we want. We want to make the stride taller. So instead of holding with your seat and just slowing the horse down, I try to think of moving my seat in the direction that I want the horse's back to go, which is actually north, okay? So we time this leg and hand together. You can, instead of holding with the thighs, which a lot of us have been taught, if we watch what I do, if I pinch with the thighs, look what happens to my body. Do I get closer to the horse or further from the horse? Further from the horse. So, which means I have less contact with my horse's back, and I'm less able to tell my horse what I want. Especially if we watch, it can be quite effective in telling the horse to slow down. So if we watch what happens when I just pinch my thighs, yes, he stops. That's nice, but that's not only what we want. Instead, I'm going to think of relaxing my stomach a little bit and pushing it towards the pommel of the saddle, which will tilt my seat bones down into the saddle for a moment, okay? And then and if I stay soft in my lower back, I can still follow the horse's movement, and that is key. You must be following and creating movement in the horse's back instead of taking it away. And that's exactly what happens if you tighten your thighs, close your knees, and hold with your stomach. You take away movement from the gait, and this is not what we want. So I'll demonstrate a little bit on both ways. So at some point we must have, a relaxed following seat. And then if I start holding with my thighs, I kill all the movement. Even if I do that and not have lots of leg, then I'm giving the conflicting aid. So I can hold, and then I lose. Then he loses the rhythm, he slows down, and the gait gets smaller and shorter instead of what I want, which is bigger. So instead, if I deepen my seat bone and I make the rhythm, keep my lower back soft and my hips moving, then you see I've not taken away any height. I've actually added height to the trot. Ride the half-halts and use the leg in the seat in the rhythm of the gait that you're in. So, one half-halt per stride is all. because when the horse is in the air, the horse can't do anything about its gait. It's in the air. So you only have the moment when the horse is on the ground to change his gait. So that's important, an important step about the timing. Another very important thing is the harder you're pushing, the harder you're trying to get what you want, normally the more stiff you are. So it's important that your horse be in front of your leg and listening. So again, the half-halt and the trot. I'm making my seatbelt heavy. And my leg driving aids, you'll see my leg still stays moving in the rhythm. I can strengthen my leg. And then I get more height to the gait. But it's all in the rhythm. So we'll talk about the hand a little bit, and this is very important. First of all, steady connection is very important. Otherwise, if you don't have contact with the rein, he's not going to feel anything. So, steady rein. Instead of pulling with your whole arm, because that's going to end up getting too much tension in your whole body, try just a squeeze of your ring finger. Okay, and the reason this works so well is by just squeezing your finger, you can still keep the relaxation in the rest of your arm and in your shoulders. Because we see, look around at any arena, you'll see a lot of pulling. So I want you to watch my arms closely. And you'll see my elbow swinging to help my hand stay steady. If I ride a half halt with my whole arm, chances are I'm not going to be quick enough to release. And it's going to look something like this. You see my elbow stiffen, and he loses rhythm. Instead, if I do it with my finger, my whole body stays soft. And it's a much more refined movement. You probably can't even see me do it. But it only happens with my finger. So, it doesn't take a lot of strength, but it does take a lot of coordination to isolate the different movements, different things that your body is doing at different times. So hand, seat, and leg, all in the same rhythm with relaxation. And this is how, because if you're pulling, chances are your horse is going to come behind the leg. And this is a problem that a lot of us have, even with forward horses. Yes, Megan?
Always a question. You were doing it every stride as demo, but I often think that you do it for a few strides and then you're not doing it, you're going forward, you're lateral, whatever.
Right.
I'm just thinking for the balance of, you're doing it when you need it, or are you truly doing it every stride when you're riding?
It's more of an as-needed basis. I like to think of half-halts at the canter coming in groups of at least 3, because normally you can't get what you want so quickly in the canter. It takes a few strides. The trot you can do one at a time, or if you're going to make a transition to, from trot to passage in everyone's dreams, right? You're going to be doing them more every stride. So it depends on what you want.
But and we have worked on the canter and phrase. You don't have a count in the trot that you.
If you want passage, it's going to be every stride.
Right.
in trot, it's going to be depending a little bit more on what you're doing at the time, what you want, how much. I mean, if you're coming off an extended trot, you're going to need quite a few probably in order to make that transition, or a lengthened stride in trot, to make the transition to the working trot or the collected trot. So it's what you need. If you're just about to do a transition to canter, you probably only need one. Hopefully you only need one. If you need more, then maybe your horse isn't listening so much. Any other questions at this time? Okay, we'll go to the canter a little bit. So the canter is really fun because I think in some ways it's easier to teach half-halts and a little bit of collected canter than it is in the trot. So, again, very important, only once each stride. The leg and the hand go together to compress the horse into a shorter stride, shorter frame. The seat bones, again, they go the way that I described, deep, but not holding. Thinks I'm not paying enough attention to him. I'm sure he's right. So you'll see that my inside leg stays on. Even as I'm collecting the canter, the rhythm stays the same. My arms are still soft. It doesn't take a lot of effort. He's in self-carriage. And you can see that the half-halts that I'm doing with my hand do not tighten my whole arm, and this is important because his frame should still stay. The pole is the highest point, the nose at or in front of the vertical. We don't want him to get too short in the neck. And then, say if I go to this lovely collected canter, and I want even more, then I can use my upper body. That's all I changed. Lean back just the little bit that you saw, and he immediately sat. Obviously, this is a very highly trained horse, but to some extent, that will work on every horse. So, and then if I want to turn, yes,
I was trying to watch with your gloves. It's your outside
outside
it's
range.
doing, and you're just using the ring fingers.
Ring finger, yes.
And you're doing it basically virtually every stride. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
if I'm actively collecting the canter, if I have the amount of collection that I want, then I can just sort of relax and enjoy it. Depends on the level of training of your horse, right?
They might fall apart the next moment.
It might. But, everyone should know that the collected canter, collected work like this is pretty hard on a horse. It's hard on them. So in the beginning when they learn it, they're going to need a little more help with you and your body. As they get up to this level, it's quite easy. Then it becomes a signal. But it's important to teach that signal from the beginning, so you're not wrestling them around, because at second level is when collection begins with the canter to walk. In order to do a good canter walk transition, they have to be able to collect the canter, maybe not like this, but at least halfway to that, because you can't just be cantering down the long side and go splat, which is what we see many times in the show arena. And it's really, I'm going to walk a little bit. It's really really not that hard to teach your horse. It's hard in the beginning, but if you practice it, you should be able to see a difference in a week, truly.
So at the lower levels, it's kind of more about rebalancing within the gait? What you're trying to do with a training level horse, for example?
Yeah, yes, but it's still executed the same way so that the horse understands the language as they get further along. And once you get out of the baby stage with your horse, say, 3 and 4-year-old horses pretty much barrel around the arena like there's a fire chasing them because they can't do much else. They don't have that kind of balance. But after you get the horse cantering at a more working canter, there's no reason they can't start to learn moments of it, a few strides. And there are some really good exercises that I would like to show you because we don't all have perfect horses, I understand. And there are some things you can do to get our horses to understand the new way because maybe they're not 3 and 4-year-olds, maybe they're older and they've been cantering this way for a long time. And now, Monday morning, we come along and we're like, hey, guess what? We're going to learn something new.
We watched Sandy. You never do this.
So, a lot of times, for example, actually even in first level, we've got a trot and a canter lengthening. The lengthening is not the hard part. It's coming back. That's the hard part. And so, that can be the tricky part. So what do you do if your horse gets to the end of the diagonal and you're like, oh God, the fence is not nearly high enough? So first you have to know, can your horse stop? Can he stop quickly? If you really put on the brakes, and that's by no means a competition halt, but you have to know if push comes to shove or push comes to pull, will he stop? If I pull on the reins. He has to do it at the canter too. And maybe this is more the canter that real people have. Real horses have. Can you stop? Boy, that's an important thing to know. You can't stop your horse on a dime. I guarantee you, you're not going to get your half-halt very quickly either. So, say we have a nice lengthening in first level that we're supposed to do down the long side, and we get to the end, and the first thing you do is not nearly small enough either to really stop the horse. So something we can do is just bring your horse to a stop. And it may not happen that quickly for you, but if you have walls, you can make it happen. But the point of it is, if you set up a pattern 3 or 4 times, or 10, when you go to just collect your horse will be expecting to slow down. So you can use that to your advantage to get your horse more sensitive to the half-halt aid. If your reins don't work, you're letting out 1/3 of the equation and it's not going to add up. So you won't get your half. So it's important to have stop. And of course it's important to have go. So then, when you come down that long side, medium canter, then you've got to use your leg a little more. maybe a better problem to have than, oh my God, I can't stop my horse. So, any other questions?
I think I heard you correctly. You're using, you said the leg and the hand, it's simultaneous?
Yes.
Okay, so that's kind of different than some of the half-halts that I've heard about.
Right.
So it's a squeeze of the finger, and what is the leg doing?
So it's not necessarily a driving leg. It's more of a supporting leg. So you don't lose the impulsion.
Like a fluff?
Yeah, exactly. Just a little, so in the rhythm, you can. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, Therese.
What about the rule where you use anytime you use your hand, you use your leg to support, or you don't use your hand without a leg supporting or doing something?
Right. That's it.
Is that a German rule? Who made that rule?
It's not the French rule. No, but it's funny. I was reading an article that George Morris was writing because that he was talking about the half-halt, and he trained under I think Denemothy, and who they teach at the beginning, leg without hand, hand without leg. That's but it was interesting that he clarified, because I've always heard that that's for babies. It's like that's how you start them. You eventually have to put them together in order to get impulsion and collection. You can't ride it with one or the other. I mean, maybe if you're a genius, but I can't. We can't. They have to be put together in order to shape the gait into what you want, into something more collected. You can take a very average-looking trot and make it look fantastic as you teach collection and you start putting the horses together. So that's important. You have to, and it's important not to use too much leg. Too much driving leg pushes your horse into your hand, and so then you get too much in your hand. It's a supporting leg. You'll know how much you need because your horse will tell you. If they're stopping, you need more leg.
The seat is the third part of that, though.
Yes.
There's so many descriptions. If you go back to the translations of the Germans, it's bracing your back or this and that.
Right.
In what you're saying, we have fingers for the rein aid. We have a supporting but moving leg for the legs. The seat, it's a use and a release. It's you described how you use it, but it's not consistent. It's not always in the same position because it's following. But I'm just seeking, a description, I guess, of how the seat is being applied as you're doing the leg and hands.
It mainly, I like to think of it as a flowing seat. You have to have a neutral following seat, but you also have to be able to tell your horse what you want. We're not always following our horse. They're not always doing what we want. But you must be able to have a following seat. It's also, I think, very important to have a moment in your riding when you're listening to your horse, when you are taking in information. If you're always telling them what you want, you can't hear what they need, what you need to do. So you have a following neutral seat, and then depending on what you want, you make your seat, the movement of your seat, take the shape of, and it's of the gait that you want. And I think it's important sometimes to picture, what do you want? So if I want more forward, then I wouldn't tighten and hold, right? So that'll tell you what you want, what do you want it to look like, what should I do with my seat? Do I want the trot to look like this? Make your seat do that. Do I want it to look like this? Make your seat do that, put it towards his ears. You want his legs out, put your seat out. But with the horse's back and in the rhythm. And that's the most important thing.
So the feeling and technical go together. So I hear people say, well, I'm a technical rider, I'm a feeling rider, but they have to go together. Otherwise,
Yes,
you don't know what to do technically if you can't feel what's happening.
that's right.
So when
exactly.
people, yeah.
Yeah, so you have to feel what your horse needs in order to apply, it's basically like a formula, in order to apply the formula of what you need to do. But you must feel, because we can't, we don't have mirrors everywhere, we can't see it, you have to feel.
We could get a motorcycle.
Have a GoPro. Like the guy who turned it backwards on his whole vacation, you guys know?
I find that with the young horses or even ones that aren't schooled where, well, you start doing the half halt and then there's a big resistance. They'll raise their head or push against you. So, I mean, when that happens, because you don't want to get into a pulling match with them.
Right.
So, how do you deal with that?
So, yeah, good question. I use a lot of suppling, so if the horse is wanting to put their head up, then bending is your friend. So you supple the horse. And I know a lot of you have done transitions, maybe on smaller circles to increase the bend. Obviously that's not his problem, he's nice and round. But say they're not taking the half halt, you can do that exercise of, can you do a full halt, do it on a circle, like that. And so, I know we're all taught to stay out the inside rein, but your horse has to be able to bend and be a boy. And the bend will make it harder for your horse to come up with the resistance. And that I would do. And actually another exercise I do is, first can they just follow the rein right, left, and come around and drop their pole like this. Try these exercises. So wherever I put the bit, my horse needs to follow. And start it at the hole. Because this can be very, very difficult for horses. They don't know what to do. They're like, oh my gosh,
Resisting
forward, backwards, sideways. They'll try and get out of it every which way. And you just keep your leg on, remember where you are, and put them back. If they step right, put them back. If they step left, put them back. Sometimes I even use the wall. If they're stepping backwards, back them up to the wall. And of course it needs to be done with feeling. You don't want to be pulling on your horse with the wall behind you. Because that doesn't always end well. But it can help give them parameters of where they can and can't go.
So while you're still teaching them bend and some basics of reaching into the bridle, either a young horse or a horse who's not done dressage, you're still developing a half halt with it. You're not waiting to have A, B, and C in place before you go to work on a half halt.
No. I probably want to develop the full halt first. that I like to have as soon as I get on the horse. Any horse. And from there, you can start to develop the half halt. So we can talk a little bit about collection in the walk. And so I can show you, say, if you have a longer walk like this, how do you know if your walk is really collected and not just slower? Listen to the footfalls. That's important. So we can make the walk shorter, but make the stepping the same speed. And so that's basically the same thing as with the trot and the canter. And then, same thing, how do you know if your lengthening is really lengthening? Of course, sometimes in the beginning, they do need to go a little faster, but you don't want to necessarily hear like trot, 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 trot. And then your collection is a trot, trot, trot. That's not collection and that's not lengthening. So It's important to listen to the footfall. Any other questions?
Sandy, would you explain again what you do with your seat when you want this kind of trot?
Okay, I'll show you. So if I want, your rule of thumb is, if you want more movement, you must move more. If your horse is going to answer you and oblige you and move more, you've got to follow along. But you have to be the first one to create it. So I can create it more with my seat by pushing my hips in the bigger part of movement. And if I want it more collected, I make the downbeat of my seat when it's heavier in the saddle. I make it even heavier, not stiffer, but heavier. But I still keep my hips moving. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
So it's emphasizing the upbeat that gets the elevation.
Pardon?
If the downbeat is collection, the upbeat is elevation.
Yes. So your hips also have to move up in the arc with the horse and help them, tell them through their back, through your connection with your seat, with their back, what you want their back to do. And that's how you keep your horse supple in the back.
Would you show us the difference of your seat for that forward lengthening movement versus the upward elasticizing movement?
Sure. And also, of course, I want to remind everyone that primary driving aid is really still your leg. So if you want extended trot or extended canter, it's really most likely going to start with your leg. Okay. Your seat also, in order to be speaking the same language as your leg, has to be telling the horse the same thing. And I think a lot of times riders are telling the horses one thing with one part of their body and another thing with the other part of their body. You know, a lot of times we drive the horse forward and we get a bigger trot, and then it's like, oh my God, I have this big trot and I can't sit it very well, and we start holding on or sitting tighter. And then you get into a position where you're telling your horse two different things. So primary driving comes from the leg. The seat must be telling them the same thing. So you need more movement with your seat. Any other questions?
Well, I guess related to that, my question first is them pushing it, like getting too forward. The other part, they drop behind a bit and like fall down and won't, like you lose your leg or the forward.
Right.
And through the half-halt, they just like stop everything.
Right. So then you go back to the basics with your horse. Just like, you know, if I pull the reins, do they stop? If I kick them, they go. So that's the fix it for that, and that has to be there, you know. And if it's not what you want, and then you can then you go back to leg without hand, hand without leg. And I do that with a lot of horses, no matter what the level is. Just to go back to like, hey, did we remember this? You know, so to break it down for them, so you school that one problem by itself, and you get through to it faster. Because it takes a long time to teach the horse the full language of putting the whole sentence together, putting everything together. You know, you have to know the individual words first before you can put them together in a meaningful language. So, you know, and if part of that equation is broken, you've got to go back and fix it. And it happens every day sometimes. Your horse gets behind your leg, or your horse gets too strong, or whatever. So, and I think sometimes the hardest thing as a rider is to go to, because we all have a plan in our heads, you know. It doesn't always go that way. And sometimes you have to go back and say like, oh, okay, let's go back and do this training level movement, even though you're going fourth level. And I think you should know that, but
I think it's more of a dream than a plan.
hallucination. Yes, Kathy.
How do you know when the green horse is ready for more collection? How can you tell, so to speak?
That's a good question, and I think it's not necessarily so cut and dry. It's like, okay, today, going to learn collection. Collection mostly is learned over a long period of time. But it starts with teaching them the individual parts so that you can start to put them together. But you know, you can ask yourself questions like, well, okay, does my horse stop reliably? Is it pulling on me? Is it hanging on me? Does it go really well off my legs reliably? Is it on my aids when they're separate? Then you can start putting them together. So, and you know, it should hopefully, if you have a plan that is a bigger picture, when we're riding these levels, that the going up the levels is a very good plan. They've made it very easy for you. Which comes first? You know, which movements come next? So it is very important to not skip movements and jump ahead, so that the USDF has spelled it out for you, for all of us. So, and that's how you know is if your horse is doing, you know, really well at training level, you know, very well at first level, then you can start adding the more sophisticated things that second level is asking of you. But you know, say if you're doing that first level test and you do that lengthening in the canter and you can't get it back at the end, you're like, but it does everything else but first level, just not that thing. Don't skip that thing, because that's a very important thing to know before you move on to second level. So, yeah, that's a clue, a hint. Anything else? Any other questions? Did I skip anything? Would you like to see anything again?
Could you repeat it all?
It will be on YouTube, and you can repeat it as many times as you like.
Bravo.
I don't know, I use my stomach muscles a lot, and I don't hear you talking about that, and
I use them. It's definitely good to have them.
I bet if I touched your stomach, it would be rock hard.
You might hurt yourself. No. times the way people teach it is very one-dimensional. It's like either,
Brace rather
yeah,
than-
Jello or brace. There's a lot more in between there, and I think it's too simplistic to think of it like that. And that's why I always stress, first of all, go with your horse's back. Picture what you want your horse's back to do it with your seat. You know, and your core is very important in order to support the rest of your body in a, you know, in a good posture for this riding, balance, everything. But if you don't have your core, you don't have the control over moving your seat and your hips the way you want it to. So I do use it, but in more of a moving fashion rather than just holding and bracing, because that's not what I want to train my horse to do. I don't want him to brace against me, so why would I brace against him? That makes sense?
But there's a small holding moment, it's just not a held hold. You know, there's a moment, isn't there, where I feel it that way, where I'm stilling motion in me.
I like to think of it maybe not stilling as more, as more being heavy and relaxed. I can train my horse like that. When I drop my seat bones, he feels it, but I didn't tighten. Does that make sense? That. But I didn't tighten. I still keep the movement of my seat, and that's important because I still want my horse's back to move in everything that I ask him to do.
But do you stop your seat when you stop? I mean,
Well, it eventually stops because the horse's back stops.
but he
You know,
stops.
if I'm doing that without leg, that's kind of the, you know, leg without hand, hand without leg.
But like he stops before you do.
While I'm still following along, my seat, in order to be in rhythm with the horse, it still has to be moving, you know, at the same speed as the horse, otherwise I'm gonna look like I'm bouncing and jiggling around if I'm out of rhythm with the horse. So that is the most important thing, is to be in rhythm with your horse.
But is it a slightly resisting rhythm when you're trying to stop the horse?
It's less resisting than just heavy. It's like if I, you know, kind of think of lobbing myself down on the horse. I'm not tight, you know, this is tight. When I tighten my thighs and hold my stomach, that's tight. But this is a more following way to do it. Just relax. And it's, they learn to feel the weight, but it's not a resistance in forward motion. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but how much of it is your strength, your habitual repetition of this, so it feels like so little to you, but some of us, we do have to apply a thought of more work, because otherwise, worse have potatoes.
Well, when you're all on the horse tomorrow, the people who are taking it, it's going to be easier to demonstrate to you. Because there is a clear difference between the two, between tightening with your stomach or, you know, making your seat bones heavy into the saddle. It's very different, and when you all go home, try it. It's a huge difference.
Do your hips go forward when your seat gets heavy?
Yes, my pelvis almost points down this way.
Yeah. So because that's sort of how I feel about using my stomach. It's like it shifts my pelvis. My seat gets heavier, my pelvis goes
Yeah.
forward. My hips go forward.
A lot of us have been taught to do this, and if you rotate your pelvis underneath you, you actually take your seat bones away from the saddle. So again, and if we are, you know, that's more of a pushing forward motion. So it's not slowing your horse down at all. So there's a question over here.
So the pyramid, so you want to talk about the pyramid a little bit? Relaxation, rhythm, relaxation, connection, impulsion, straightness, collection. Did I miss
Yeah.
one? I mean, because, well, the point of, well,
Particular thing.
well, the point is, so the point is like where along that.
Sounds like math to me.
Yeah, so where along that pyramid are you introducing, like your first thing is rhythm. So you're not necessarily are you doing half halt when you're in every ride where you're starting with the rhythm and then the relaxation and then the connection. So you have to have connection to do half halt. So when you start your ride and rhythm relaxation, now you get to connection. Now you're introducing the half halt in that particular ride. Is that how that works?
Yeah, I mean, every horse that I get on, you can't necessarily talk about doing half halts on the babies who haven't learned, acceptance of the bridle yet. We're still like, kick means go, pull means whoa. So, those horses are a little bit exempt from the half halts. We do want to know that they stop. When I take up the reins, they stop. He said that's the first thing that we like to teach them.
But a Grand Prix horse, you start with the relaxation or rhythm relaxation. So every horse, no matter the level, you're going through that pyramid and you're introducing the half halt at the point you get to the connection. Or some of the horses are faster. The rhythm, relaxation, and connection happen in like a half a circle.
Right. Well, I teach my horses connection really and to yield to the connection basically when my feet hit the stirrups. So as soon as I get on that horse's back, I pick up the reins and, I ask them to yield to the bit. Practically including the babies will learn that. I teach them that on the ground. I teach them to, to drop their pole, to pole pressure, to bit pressure, and teach that before I even get on their back. So connection, that's just obedience. You can teach it standing next to them. So, and that has to be there. So it's there as soon as my butt hits the saddle. I don't take 25 circles to let that horse accept the connection, because that's not 25 circles I'm gonna enjoy.
So you're saying the first 4 levels of the pyramid perhaps you're working on simultaneously because they all have a part of the beginning rides. You're working on rhythm, you're working on relaxation, you're working on connection.
Right.
And
And
impulsion.
half halt may be in any part of it when needed, or the idea of.
As soon as the connection is, the obedience to the contact is established and obedience to the leg, then you can start putting them together. So pretty early on in a horse's basic training, to a very low degree, a low level, but it can. That's where you start. So it doesn't become a big surprise when you hit second level and you have to like, oh dear God, I have to do canter to walk, and you don't have that. So you started from the beginning. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, Megan put it together. It's like you're in the first 4 levels of the pyramid, you're just skipping along. Before you get to straightness and collection, you're kind of going along those. Yeah.
Yeah, but like I said,
And you're right, they have to be.
Horse isn't accepting the bridle.
Yeah.
Probably not going to want to ride it.
But is there a difference between connection? Is there a difference between true connection and accepting the bridle? With the young horse, it's just them listening to the rein versus as they progress, the connection is more feeling.
Well, I mean, the rider has to know how to have a true connection too, and I think, I mean, now we're getting into like how do you train babies? That's sort of a little more advanced question. What's the difference between acceptance of the bridle and connection? There's a lot of different connections, but at some point your the rein has to be straight. It has to be connected to the horse. If it's doing this, you have no connection. Can the rider produce connection? That's a bigger question, really. Can the rider produce a consistent connection? And that's another.
Because you see reins going slack a lot of times, even in, you see that happening a lot at all levels.
Right, and that's not necessarily the horse's fault. That's most likely refer to workshop number 1.
On YouTube.
Not without intent. A lot of times I will give, with intent, and then bring it back.
Good
But
question.
not as a habit. I don't do it as a wiggly kind of habit. No, it must be with intention. Otherwise, your horse is, you're basically just trusting that your horse is listening to you. And
You guys like give them a break though? I mean, like it seems like sometimes it seems like they need a break or reward.
certainly
just
walk
let
on.
them go.
Walk on loose rein. Absolutely.
Still
Or even
intention.
in the trot, like if they work hard and let them stretch and just have a break,
Unless you're stretching, into contact, into the bridle, A, you have no control, and B, your horse is most likely on the forehand. So we always stretch into a steady rein. It's going to be a much lighter rein, and yes, that is a break. The stretching. We should finish it anyway, but you stretch into a steady rein. So, walk on the loose rein. And again, with intent, you can give. Good to check your horse. Is he really bending to the inside? Or is he pulling his neck to the outside as soon as I give? But again, it's with intent. And, some horses take the contact more or less, but they should all stretch towards the bit. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
You're riding a horse that's kind of not real uphill, like a canter, like maybe a thoroughbred, and they kind of like pull the reins out of your hands. I don't know, it just seems like it's hard to follow that movement. It's like they're either jabbing against it or the reins are slack or.
What can you do about that? I think a lot of problems show up in the canter that are probably still there at walk and trot, but less noticeable to you. It's very hard to fix problems in the canter just because of the sheer speed of the gait and the leverage that the horse has against you. So I usually advise going back to walk and trot. Get them really supple, these exercises. Obedient, supple, at the halt if you need to. At the halt, walk and trot before you go back to the canter. And use small circles if the horse is, two against you. And just do little bits, because once that horse gets up ahead of steam, it's really hard to fix when you're going at Mach 1. Go back and try it again.
Balance more at the walk and trot.
Yep.
Transitions.
Yep, exactly. Downward transitions. Use the wall. Walls are your friends. Anything else? Ready? All right, Ritello. Here, I'll get
That was all for me? I'd rather have
Ritello.
carrots.
Ritello. Good boy. Handsome man. Good boy.
Does he like grapes? Maybe he likes grapes.
I was thinking, I don't think so. I think I
Cracker?
Good boy. Oh, I got lots
He
of treats.
wants a hard cider.
I got lots of treats in my pocket.
Oh, good. You need treats.
Come here, Ritello. Good boy. He's such a good boy. Oh, get that bridle nice and dirty. Yes, I know. He's a good boy.
It's a lot harder to slip in mouth.
Good boy. See if I have.
Not quite the butt massage that Releve is.
Thank you. I'll see you tomorrow. You're welcome.
So good, yes.